Dear friends in Christ, and good morning. It's good to be back with you this morning. Kind of a setup and preliminary before we get into the text of our sermon this morning is, as I kind of previewed at the gospel, when I read the gospel lesson, this passage this morning picks up on last week. It's part of that Sermon on the Mount. It's that continuous flow. So let me back you up just a little bit. And what was happening, remember last week, is Jesus had followers surrounding him, and he had a lot of followers that come around him. And so he took those followers and he brought them up on top of that mountain, that kind of rise little hill there on the north side of the Sea of Galilee, and he set them down at his feet. And he began giving them the Sermon on the Mount. And he's talked about being blessed. Remember, over and over again in that Sermon on the Mount, Jesus talks about blessed are. And we boiled it really down to blessed are those who really get to sit at his feet. Blessed are who are the desperate, who get to sit at his feet and soak in what he says and get to be in his presence. And following right after that section in here, in that Sermon on the Mount, comes our text, where Jesus is talking about salt, and we're going to focus on light this morning. The light part of that. So with that set up in here, you ever been caught in the dark? I mean the really dark stuff. I mean dark like down in a cave, where you can't see, you can't, some of you are going, yeah, where you can't see your hand in front at your nose in here dark. And you get in there and you get those situations in here, right? Like when Mr. Jim did the children's message a minute ago. When you light that light, how everybody's eyes go right to it, right? That gets the center of everybody's attention. That light in that dark place, it gets people's attention and it focuses people on that. That's what we're talking about this morning. Jesus says, let your light so shine before men that people see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. This idea of shining in the darkness has intrigued people for centuries. Now, not so much, but I can take you back thousands of years in here, is the idea in the darkness, before the times of electricity. And you experience this over in Kenya out at night around, because there's not a whole lot of electricity. There's none of this street lights and stuff you get from city. When it gets dark, it gets dark. The only thing you have is really the light of the moon, right? Because this moon's a strange object in here. It's one of those things, believe it or not, right? Only 12 men have ever walked on the moon. Just 12 of them. From the days of Apollo. Genesis calls the moon the light, the lesser light that governs the darkness. For centuries, people thought the moon was that smaller light source. The sun was the big one during the day, but the moon was that smaller light source in the middle of the night. And the moon has this, early centuries ago, people would figure out that the moon was some sort of clock. They could keep track of things by simply watching the phases of the moon, that 28-day thing, that there was a cycle calendar going on in here. People of old thought the moon and was going in here was a harbinger of death. And so you had stories cropping up right in full moon, like werewolves and stuff. Came around it during the full moon. People used to say in olden times would say in here is that this time of the full moon is when mamas had babies and people got crazy. Which I'm not so sure that OB nurses and police officers wouldn't necessarily disagree with that today. And everybody was going on like this as the moon was that smaller light source in the night sky until about 400 BC. Because it was about 400 BC, it was the Greeks who figured out, hey, the moon only reflects light. It's not a light source. It only reflects light. It simply reflects the sun's light. That's exactly what we're talking about. Jesus says, remember, let your light so shine before men that they see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. It's a matter of reflecting God's light. It's not that we have the light. It doesn't come from you. It comes from Him. That's the reason for the blessings we talked about last week. That's the reason for the spiritual gifts. That's the reason for the grace, the love, the forgiveness that God pours into your heart. He wants you to, yes, number one, have a relationship with Him, but He wants people to be able to see Him through you. Now, when people sit and look at you, they don't say, wow, what a great guy that person is, or what a great lady that is. They want to, people wants to see you, they go, wow, how great is God? How great is God? That's what we want them to do. And that's why that light, we reflect that light going off into the world. We who are in the presence of God reflect that light. Same thing that happens, the Israelites of the Exodus, time of the Exodus, they got this. They got this every day. After the building of, during the Exodus, right, Moses leads the people to Mount Sinai, and they build, right, God hands down the 10 Commandments in here, and they meet God in that whole story with the golden calf and stuff going in. And then after that, Moses builds, at God's instructions, Moses builds what's called the tabernacle. It's where God dwells among His people. It's God's presence among His people. Now, pause a second. It's exactly the same word that John uses, by the way, in chapter 1 when he says, and the Word became flesh and tabernacled among us. The presence of God was living and dwelling in the midst of His people. And Moses, as part of his job, Moses would go into the very presence of God every day. He'd go into the presence of God, and he'd look at God face to face like we are doing this morning, and he'd look at God here and talk with God, and he'd come out. And I'm sure it doesn't say, but I'm sure this is kind of what would happen is he'd come out. He'd come out of being in the presence of God, and people wouldn't look at him. He'd come up, and they'd go like this. Or he'd come up, and they'd go turn the other direction. Or he'd come up, and he'd go like this. And it wouldn't take anybody, right? A couple of days of this, and Moses is probably getting a little paranoid here, right? Because suddenly nobody's looking at him. And finally one day he probably comes up and gets the courage, and he asks somebody, and he says, as they're going like this, right? Talk to the back of their head. He says, hey, what's the deal? Why isn't anybody looking at me anymore? And they sit here and they say, Moses, you got to put a veil on. He says, a veil, that's for girls. Man, I'm not going to wear a veil. And they say, no, you don't understand, Moses. Your face is so bright. It hurts our eyes. We're not looking at you because it hurts our eyes. Your face is reflecting the glory of God. You've been in the presence of God, and we see that in your face, and it hurts our eyes. Isaiah calls us the people who have seen a great light. We are the ones who have come regularly and come into His presence. We are the ones who are the followers who sit at His feet and listen to His voice. We are the ones who are blessed who have seen ourselves. We are the ones who are blessed that we count us as His followers. It's this identity that comes to us in baptism. We're a part of His family. We're a part of Him. We have His name. It's who we are. We have that. We've got those blessings in here, and it's a matter of doing what Moses did. It comes naturally, is letting God's light shine. So when people see us, they don't look at us and say, wow, what a great writer, or wow, what a great preacher, or wow, what a great singers, or wow, what great musicians in here. They look at us and they go, wow, how good is God? That's the objective in here. Let your light so shine before men that people see your good works. Here's the emphasis in that verse. And give glory to your Father in heaven. And we can do this in everyday life. This is an everyday thing. Let me share with you a story. True story. This story occurred many years before I even began to had the possibility of God's crazy plan, that crazy idea of me going to seminary. I was working for Conoco Oil Company. And I'd recently gotten transferred to the Oklahoma City office. And coming into the Oklahoma City office, started my work on a Monday and started working. And, it's like starting other office. You want to do your job right, but you want to fit in with people. You're working together and you want to fit in and going in. And it was going well. And Friday came along, and Friday morning somebody in the office walked up and said, "Mark, hey, several of us here in the office go to lunch on Fridays, kind of just to get together and laugh and stuff. You want to go?" And I said, "Sure." Way to connect with people. So went out that first week and went out to lunch with them on that first week. And sat down, and we, there's probably 10, 15 of us around this table, and there's males and females, young and old in here. And we sit here, sit on the table, and we order. And as soon as we get the order in, the waitress attendant had left. Conversation started, and it didn't take long as they started telling off-color jokes. Now, it's not one of those times of life that I'm necessarily proud of in here. In high school and college, I hung around with football players, and after football, I had worked in the oil fields for a year in here. My ears weren't virgins by this time. Okay? But I got to tell you, those were the most filthiest off-color jokes I have heard since, until that time and since. And I'm sitting here and I'm going, what is going on around here? I've never been in a place like this anywhere, much less a work environment. I didn't know what I was going to do. And so we finished that out. Out the next week, and next week was the same way, and the next week was the same way, and the next week was the same way, going on. And I'm sitting here struggling. I didn't know what I was going to do. Because there was a part of me sitting there says, well, just quit. Just don't go. Just go run and hide in here. Don't expose your ears. Don't expose your mind. Don't expose your stuff, yourself to that kind of evil influence. Just separate yourself from it. Just run away from it. And then somewhere along the line, I sit here and I said, no, that's not what Jesus is talking about. That's not letting your light so shine before men that they give glory to your Father in heaven. So I struggled some more what I was going to do. And finally, I came up with a simple solution. I decided that no matter what happened, I wasn't going to laugh. That's all I was going to do. I wasn't going to complain. I wasn't going to preach. I wasn't going to Bible thump. I wasn't going to do anything. All I was going to do is not laugh. So we came up here the next week after I decided this. I came in and sat down. Same routine goes in, right? Everybody orders. They start in on the filthy jokes in here, right? As long as they were having a conversation about other things, I was participating. I was laughing, participating in here. They start in on the jokes again. I got a stone face, the best stone face I could put on my face. Did nothing. Second week, come back in. Second week I came in and we sat down and they started in on the dirty jokes again. This time, all of the ladies sitting around the table, all of them were like me. All of them had stone faces. And as I remember, a couple of the ladies, if looks could kill. Going. Took 4 weeks. Took 4 weeks. That was it. All right. Was it easy at times? Nope. Did I have to Bible thump? Did I have to preach? Nope. Did I have to scream and yell? Nope. Did I have to make a scene? Nope. Did you let your light so shine before men that they give glory to your Father in heaven? Yeah. In here. That's what God sends us out to do in the everyday things of life. Let your light so shine before men that they give glory to your Father who is in heaven. And it can be in the ordinary things of life. Sometimes, yes, it's those monumental things. The team over here in Kenya, you heard 27 baptisms. They're going over there doing medical clinic. Sometimes it's those great, big, huge things. Most of the time, though, it's not those great, big things. It's the little things in life. It's walking into Schnucks. It's driving down the street. It's going to school. It's going to work. It's those little things in life. That's where we have to open our eyes and be ready to let your light so shine before men that you give glory to your Father in heaven. So I'm going to end this sermon. This is not one of those fuzzy, warm endings to a sermon here. Because Jesus doesn't end this section on warm and fuzzy. He ends it with a challenge that you've heard over and over. And the challenge is this. How do you do that? How do you do that in your life? And these everyday things that you pass in your life, how do you do that? How do you let your light so shine before men that they give glory to your Father in heaven? Amen.